Hello and welcome to today's grand incident. Every popular series needs its cute mascot, right? Pokemon has Pikachu, and Final Fantasy has Moogle. Toho does have Chirno, if you count her, but if you're thinking of soft and squishy, then the fans have got you covered. Meet the Ukuri, a miraculous fan creation spawned on an image board back in 2008 due to some poor sap's attempt at ASCII art with Reimu and Marissa, resulting in an image of their disembodied heads. Honestly, the history of these creatures is incredibly fascinating, and also kind of depressing, but I'm not here to tell you about all that. There are two things I want you to take away from this opener: knowing the basic idea of what a Ukuri is, and understanding that some incredibly strange and magical creations can spawn from something as simple as a shitpost gone wrong. Now to get to the point, what do you think would happen if someone decided to take a bunch of these goofy ideas given life on an image board and turn it into a game? That's what I wanted to talk about today. A Toho game full of plenty wondrous and ridiculous ideas fresh off of the forums. The game known as Takkomon Kouzatsu World. The game was released May 27, 2012 by Dojin Circle Ilu Collab and is a Mega Man Zero style of game starring the character known as Takkoman. Before I get started, there's some things to mention. Almost, if not every character in this game originates from the Scarlet Weather Rhapsody strategy and chat thread on the Greater Toho Genso board. The main character herself, Takkoman, is a Yakumo Yukara Ukuri with Hakure Reimu's lower half. The name Kouzatsu is actually an abbreviation of the thread itself, but I'm getting sidetracked. A lot of the jokes and references come from here, and considering the game is nearly 9 years old now, it's difficult to pinpoint most of their origins. All I really have to go by is what the wiki has. I'll do my best with the information I have, but sorry to say I'm just about as lost as anyone with how these characters really came to be. With all that said, time to get into the game. The story here is that the world of Gensokyo is fusing with another, known as Kozatsukyo. In the middle of the collapsing world, the girl Takkoman awakes, and for the sake of peace and rest, sets out to stop the two worlds from merging. Right away, you get a prologue stage that will teach you your moves. It's in Japanese, so in my case, it was just hitting the buttons to see what I could do. Takkoman has two methods of attacks, shooting and kicking. Shooting is straightforward. It's relatively weak, but can be charged up. Kicking is where it's really at. Takkoman has a standard 3-hit combo and different attacks based on your inputs. Somersaults, flurry rushes, and drop kicks. There's plenty of different kicks to use. You also have a dash and a special attack. Dashing will let you go through projectiles, and can be cancelled at any point. You get up to 2 dashes in the air until you land as well. Dashing is incredibly important, as there's a lot of projectiles in the game, so it's your best bet at getting close, as your strongest option to attack is short-range melee. You only have one special attack to start with, which is just a small shockwave with a bit of stun. Special attacks cost meter, which are the shiny ribbons next to your health bar. You fill this simply by attacking enemies. I think it increases the bigger your combo, but I'm not quite sure about that. You'll obtain more special moves with each boss, but that covers the basics of it. One last thing to mention is that there's no extra lives to grab. You're instead given 4 lives at the start of every stage. For the stage itself, I actually think it's more difficult than some of the others. That might just be because you do it before you really know how to play the game, or because of the mid-boss. Boss fights tend to have multiple health bars, and kicking them is always the best option. Hitting a boss with a special kick, or the 3rd hit of your combo, tends to make them flinch, and then grants them a period of super armor, indicated by the boss flashing and the yellow circle surrounding them. You can still hurt them during this, but it's better that you wait it out with dodging or even shooting. As you can see from the footage, I'm fighting a nuclear squid, which seems to be somewhat common in Kozatsukyo, given how many times you'll see one in the game. Moving on, reaching the end of the stage, you'll meet who seems to be the main cause of the whole incident, the being known as Everyone's Grudges. She's a pushover compared to the squid, just watch out for the snakebite. Once she's defeated, Takkoman will descend onto the merging world to start fixing things. Before that though, you'll get your results. You get ranked on different things here, and each is graded between D and A. These are pretty clear, aside from the last, the Ikobins. This is basically a combo meter, and apparently it's possible to hold a full combo up to a boss. But I can barely get a C rank, so expect my scores to be less than amazing. As expected from Mega Man, you're now given the choice of 8 different bosses to fight. You can start anywhere you want, and honestly, I'm not sure if any boss has weaknesses. So just pick whatever one looks the most interesting and go from there. I'll be going with my own order here, and I'll be starting with the top right. This stage is all indoors and has no pits. The gimmick here is finding the crystal to hit to open a door to progress. Most of the enemies only show up after these are hit too, so it feels a bit calmer than other stages. Speaking of enemies, there's quite the variety of strange little creatures throughout the game. I won't be explaining any of them, as there's a lot of them, and I don't know all their names or origins, but I do appreciate how silly most of them are. That's about it for the stage, really. There's no secret collectibles in the game, so you can focus solely on getting to the end. I won't be going too in depth of each stage, but I will cover the main gimmicks that set them apart. Now for the boss, and what a boss it is. This is Skylin, an incarnation of chaos. She primarily attacks with spooky ghosts and lasers. You have to take out her rainbow wings first, as they allow her to regenerate faster than you can hurt her. Once she goes down, you get the K-footed special. This move costs your entire meter, but it hits everything on screen, and does decent damage to bosses. All special moves are tied to the special attack button, so every special is a different command, combining either a direction, the shoot button, or both. Just remember, S is special, and B is shoot. Alright, next stage, that one being at the immediate top. This stage is primarily a water level. I know how that sounds, but it's better than you think. You can dash infinitely while underwater, and it's fun to do. I don't know if I feel that way when it comes to the boss fights though. I actually opted to use charge shots to fight the mid-boss because I was having trouble moving towards it for melee range. It's the only boss I did it for too. Moving on to the big boss, it's Ikaden, the ruler of underwater. The boss fight is underwater, of course, and she attacks with bullets from the end of the screen, as well as spinning into you with her umbrella. She's incredibly mobile too, so chasing her can be annoying, but that's really the worst of it. Ikaden gives you the Ichimen no Zendara move, which is a spinning ram attack done by pressing special out of a dash. For stage 3, it's the top left. This level is a factory with a few rooms that requires you to defeat all enemies to progress, as well as conveyor belts and electric currents that instantly kill you. The only thing I want to remark on with the stage itself is with the giant bottle mid-boss. It jumps towards you, but won't jump down, so if you let it get too close to the edge, it will just block you from climbing up. Don't know the strategy here, I just mash the kick button until I beat it to prevent getting knocked down. For the boss, it's Fried Iku, the manager of the Nagai Foods factory. She bounces around a lot while shooting, and as the fight progresses, the arena changes. It's a bit obnoxious for sure, but in the third phase, the enemies she calls down can drop health, so if you're in trouble, you can try to grab a few of those before the final phase. Fried Iku will give you the Takkoman Stomp move. It's a ground pound with a shockwave. Simple and effective. Next stage is the immediate left. This stage begins as an elevator ride enemy gauntlet, and ends with another nuclear squid. At least I think it's a squid? Well, regardless, that's the majority of the stage. Afterwards, you just head right to reach the boss. That boss is Unyunge, a high maneuver creature with the power of nuclear fusion. That explanation should set your expectations. She's fast and her attacks are massive. I won't lie, I face tanked it while hoping for a good pattern. I'm not really sure how to approach this fight properly, and I really didn't bother trying to learn either. Unyunge will give you the Takkoman Spark move, which is a big laser, as you likely guessed already just from its name. Stage 5 now is the bottom left. The layout of this stage reminds me of the prologue stage, in that it's a lot of floating debris, but now it's worse with moving platforms and collapsing platforms. This is the stage where most of your deaths will be caused by falling, but at least there's no mid-boss to fight. I actually consider this one to be the hardest stage, and as luck would have it, it was the first stage I ever attempted, as I just had to know what the boss was. And that boss is Uttoban, a super giant creature. This boss fight is unique with how it works, and you can only shoot and dodge. Hope you have good depth perception, because this boss has a lot of HP, and her attacks hurt quite a bit. I think it's a pretty fun fight, even if some of the dodging feels incredibly precise to pull off. Uttoban gives you the Tacopedia move. It lets you shoot out one of those squishy creatures with hats. Not really sure how to use it though, it's kinda weird to do. Stage 6 now, and that is the immediate bottom. It's a factory type level like Fried Iku's, but more electricity hazards as it's a power plant. Despite it being similar, it manages to be its own stage separate from Iku's. There is an electric mollusk as the mid-boss too. Not nearly as bad as Nuclear Squid, but that's okay because the actual boss is worse. That boss is Kimeru, the master of the Kimila power plant. This is another boss that moves around a lot, and her hitbox is accurate to the magnets, meaning it's very easy to get hit while trying to kick her. She also has a lot of attacks, but her worst is probably the Sonic Boom. This is a fight that wants you to slow it down. You could even say it wants you to take it easy. Well, when you do win, she'll give you the Kimeru shield move. This summons a ring of smug that will block 3 hits for you. Now for stage 7, that one being the immediate right. This stage opens up as a side-scrolling shooter, with your controls being the same as the Uttoban fight. At the end of the flight section, guess who drops in? I should mention that this guy actually has a name. Its nickname is Hagedin, but I've grown to like the name Nuclear Squid, so whatever you want to call it is fine. The rest of the stage is also like Uttoban's, so on to the boss. The boss is Ikaden, the envoy of Kouzatsu. She shoots and dashes, but stays mostly grounded, and isn't particularly difficult to deal with by using your 3-hit combo and waiting out the armor. She also has a good amount of similar moves to you. I mean, one look at her and you probably would have guessed that yourself. Ikaden gives you the Takkoman fever, where Takkoman will grow some arms and strike a pose summoning a lightning strike. You can get interrupted during the pose, but the attack will still go through. Time for the last stage, the bottom right. I was going in counterclockwise order, so why did I skip one? Well, the boss is the supporting character, so I wanted to make it dramatic. Just kidding. I saved it for last because it's an auto-scroller, and I hate those. Hold forward and hope an enemy doesn't knock you down to have the screen crush you. What more can I really say about it? You actually fight the boss twice, and it's only a little different at the end than in the middle. That boss is Ikaden, the supporting character who wasn't able to be of any help, and instead started exploring the bamboo forest. She's similar to Ikaden. The difficulty comes from her cloning herself. Otherwise, it's very similar to how you handled her. Dodge her and the bullets, and 3-hit combo when she's vulnerable. Ikaden gives you the Gokuto Ken move. It's a big kick forward that looks very strong, but I couldn't find very many places to use it myself. Well, that's all the bosses, but you already knew that wasn't the end of the game. Each one of these new stages has its own name, so I'll just be referring to them by that, starting with the first one, Isolation Ward. This first stage is a mashup of different stage themes throughout the game, and as a result, it's a bit long. This is the last time you'll see the Nuclear Squid, and this is probably the worst version of him to deal with too. It's hard to get a clean hit, and the attack patterns go on for a while. At least this is his last appearance. The boss isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's more than capable of taking you out. The boss is Mazuli, a catfish witch, I guess. She walks around and lets her magic stones do the attacking. Each color is a different attack. The problem with this boss isn't necessarily due to the RNG in which attacks she uses, but more so that there's no indication of what's coming until it's there. And with some attacks starting directly under her, you can get sucker punched easily. I know you could slow it down and wait, but she has a lot of HP, so it's not the most exciting method available. The next stage is Climb the Blue. This stage has you running away from a giant keystone while avoiding obstacles. This stage is cool as its design makes it look like you're running up the side of a wall. It's much shorter than the last, and that's probably because getting caught by the boulder behind you is an instant kill. The boss of the stage is actually the same thing you were running from. Its name is Dekatenko, and it now slams the ground and rains smaller stones on you. Its size is intimidating, but the trick to it is that it doesn't have a hitbox after it lands, so as long as you don't get squished, you can dash in and start kicking. The next stage is Hotel Kamishirosawa, and to cut to the point, it's a boss rush. You'll have to fight 6 of the 8 bosses, and now they're paired up. They share a health bar at least, but since it's just 2 bosses put together, they act independently of each other, which can very quickly turn to chaos depending on which attacks they use. The worst is definitely the first. The combination of Ikaden and Kimeru is ridiculous, and I can't tell if the underwater arena makes this worse or not. Group 2 isn't nearly as bad, as it's similar to fighting Ikaden alone anyways. The last pair is Untitled and Skylin, and while you don't have to destroy any wings, that doesn't make this fight simple. Remember how I said I face tanked the actual Untitled fight? Now imagine that with all the nonsense that Skylin throws at you. At least the entire stage is only these fights, but it can get frustrating fast. Now the final stage, Another Words. It's only a boss, and surprise, everyone's grudges returns with a few accessories. The fight is pretty much the same as the prologue one, but of course there's no way that's the end of this. Defeating her will reveal her second form, Everyone's Curse. This massive creature has a lot of HP and a lot of attacks, with them getting faster and more erratic halfway through. In case you're wondering what exactly this abomination is, it's a mashup of a bunch of the Toho characters that weren't included in Toho 10.5, Scarlet Weather Rhapsody. I like that the main character chosen to represent this resentment was a character who was included in the next fighting game released. This boss is hard, and pretty tedious, as dying will bring the boss back up to full HP. Fortunately this time around I beat it first try, but I know I've spent at least an hour total fighting just this boss alone. When the curse is defeated, the 2 worlds will separate and peace will be restored, warning that someday the calamity would return. After that, the credits will roll. Before I wrap up, there's some extras in the game to check out. The first, of course, is the other difficulties, those being Hard, Hell, and Insane, and you unlock each difficulty by clearing the one before it. Hard mode increases the amount of enemies and bullets they shoot, as well as how much damage you take. Insane is the same, but the game runs faster. Hell mode is pretty accurate to its name. You have 1 HP, and healing items kill you. You do get plenty of extra lives that start you with a full special bar, and all bosses lose HP over time. But considering how hard it is to avoid getting hit in this game, I'd never want to even try. There were more difficulties in development, a lunatic, and even an extra stage, but they were abandoned due to various reasons. Aside from that, there's a gallery mode, where you can check out replays and stage scores, watch the cutscenes and listen to the game's music, as well as viewing achievements. Not sure if the achievements grant anything special, but for the most part, they're for clearing stages on certain difficulties or with good rankings. The last option is the Tacopedia, which redirects to a website full of information on the characters who appear in the game, although it's all in Japanese. So while I wouldn't mind reading all the different entries, there is really no convenient way for me to do so. As I mentioned earlier, pretty much all the info I have comes from what's translated on the wiki, with some extra info not available there from a translator I know. I'll be leaving a link to both of them down below. Even with the language barrier in place, this is definitely a game you can pick up and play, and I really do think it's worth checking out, if only for the ridiculous nature of the game. Takkomon Kouzatsu World is a very strange game. Despite its silly concept, it's actually a very competent game. Controls work well, and the movement feels good. Being able to cancel your dash at any time is great, and the variety of attacks is nice. The art is fantastic, and the music is right up there with it, and extra difficulties with achievements adds to its replayability. The game isn't too hard to get into, as a lot of the enemies in the game don't do that much damage, and some bosses can be beaten simply by mashing, although you should still at least try to fight them regularly. While I do think it's more so on the beginner-friendly side, I also think this game can be quite frustrating. You get hit a lot, and while it may not do much damage, it can get under your skin fast. Your dash will go through bullets, and some of your kicks will too, but they don't do anything for physical attacks. And there's a lot of bullets on the screen to navigate through while also avoiding getting tackled. You can't cancel any kicks into a dash, and some enemies are too short to shoot. Honestly, the negatives are pretty much entirely tied to how frustrated you get from taking constant chip damage, so if you're actually good at these types of games, then I don't think you'd be too bothered by this. I like that despite how weird this game is, it's actually really solid. It's a great example of not judging a book by its cover. Regarding the Circle, Edu Collab, they're still active to this day. This is actually the first time I'm covering a game from a group I've covered a game from already, so I don't really know what to say here aside from either they're still active or they're still inactive. At least I can say that by the time this video releases, they'll have released Genso Skydrift on PS4, with new characters and tracks for all the platforms it's currently on. With all that said, time for the rating. Takkomon Kouzatsu World is, simply put, a ranked Chirno of a game. Let me explain why. This may seem a bit weird to say since the entire game is made up of references, but given how little story there really is here, you don't need to know what any of them are. It doesn't help that so many of them were born on a forum from over 10 years ago. I don't know if Toho knowledge even really helps understanding any of this, as at least for me, I only recognized what character each enemy was based on, but nothing more than that. It may even be arguable whether or not you can call this a Toho game at all. Would you agree or disagree? Let me know what you think. Takkomon Kouzatsu World is weird in every sense of the word. It's crazy that a group would create a game based on such wacky source material, and even crazier that it's actually an incredibly solid game. It's definitely a shame that it never got those extra modes, but what's there is still plenty more than you'd expect. If you're into the Mega Man Zero games, then I think it's worth checking out for at least one playthrough. And if you're good at those games too, then the higher difficulties might interest you in more runs. The game may be extremely goofy at first glance, but I promise you that watching it played properly will leave you speechless, instead of in stitches. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you during the next incident.